Chair recognises the honourable member for Mount Pearl Southlands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm just going to take a couple of minutes. I wasn't expecting this big debate this afternoon, to be honest with you. But I'm glad we're having a discussion in the meantime. Certainly, what we are debating here in Committee of the Whole is really a bill that deals with multi-year funding for not-for-profit organisations. And I think, as I said in second reading, it's been a while ago since we had second reading, I think, but at the time that I was very supportive of this. And I know all members on both sides of the House, I'm sure. There's not one member here that is not supportive of this particular bill in providing certainty to the multiple organisations throughout our province who make up the social sector, who play an extremely important role in our communities throughout the province, to be able to provide them with some financial certainty so that they can plan their operations on a multi-year level. Because currently, they can't even plan from year to year. Because, as we know, under the existing formula, if you will, that basically an organisation would have to apply for funding, core funding, and whether we can all play games with whether it's core funding or whether it's project funding, and we can call it what we want. There is certainly a difference, obviously, because core funding is for your core operations, generally to pay salaries of your staff that you would have, and project funding is supposed to be just that there's a certain project that your organisation wants to get involved with any given year, and they apply for money to be able to execute that project. Now, we all know that over the years that whether it be core funding or project funding, it all kind of got mixed together. Everybody put in an application. The organizations didn't care whether you called it core funding or project funding or what it was called. The bottom line is they need the money to operate. And if they had to put in money if they had to put in an application and say it was for a specific project in order to get that funding to pay for the staff, I guess that's what they did. Or if they put it under and they called it core funding. At the end of the day, what it came down to was we had organizations that could not function without some government money, and they applied each year, and each year, generally speaking, they received their funding. And we've seen the history, and my colleague from Mount Pearl North has, basically stated here, and he's given numerous examples of organizations that year over year applied for funding and they received that funding. It may have adjusted upwards a little or downwards a little, depending on the budget at the time and so on, but generally it was a pretty consistent amount. The problem, of course, that they had is that there was never a guarantee. Even though the history was there, year over year, there was never a guarantee that when they applied for that money, that they were actually going to receive that money. So they couldn't even plan a year in advance, let alone 3 years in advance. So what we're proposing, what the government has proposed in this particular bill, and we all agree with, is to allow organizations now to be able to apply for multi-year funding. I think it's for 3 years, so that they can have some certainty in terms of planning their activities over 3 years, and they know that they can operate and do the good work that they're doing. And I commend government 100% on doing that. I support it 100%. I think the issue that we're seeing here now, though, is not really about, in a sense, a lot of the discussion we're having now is not even about the bill. Really, technically it's got nothing to do with the bill that we're even supposed to be debating. But what we're seeing is that we're using this opportunity to point out shortfalls in last year's budget. Really, this is kind of, to my mind, we're having a budget debate we're reflecting on the budget as opposed to actually debating the bill. That's really what's happening. And I suppose it is an opportunity to, to point out, and that's not to dismiss the concerns, because we all know in the budget, because of the fiscal circumstances that we're under, that decisions had to be made. They weren't all easy decisions. And some people will agree and some people will disagree with what those decisions were and what should be a priority and what shouldn't be a priority. I think what my colleagues, though, are just doing is pointing out and taking the opportunity to point out the fact, which is a legitimate point, that while it is valuable and it's a good move to provide multi-year funding, as is the case now in this bill, while it's good to do that, and we all acknowledge that it's a good thing, we all support it, it's pointless in providing inadequate multi-year funding. I think that's the point, really, that's being made here. It's one thing to have multi-year funding, but the multi-year funding you're providing needs to be adequate multi-year funding for the organizations to be able to carry out the important work that they're doing. And I know every MHA in this House, every one of us, have numerous groups and organizations in our various communities where we attend functions that they have, we attend their annual general meetings, we attend their fundraisers, and the list goes on. And we try to help them with obtaining grants and providing them with information and JCP programs and whatever might be available. We all do that. That's our job. And we all realize the incredibly valuable work that all of these community organizations do in our communities. And I think it's fair to say, I've gone to numerous events where they would ask me to say a few words or whatever, and whether it be something in my community or just in the region generally, whether it be a particular walk or run or event. I think the last one comes to mind. I believe this summer I went to the AIDS Walk, the Scotiabank AIDS Walk. And I said at that time, they asked me to say a few words, and I said at that time, and I say it at all these events, government cannot be the be-all and end-all. They cannot be everything for everybody. That these community groups and organizations, whether it be the AIDS Committee of Newfoundland and Labrador, whether it be the Autism Society, whether it be the Boys and Girls Club, Boy Scouts of Canada, Scouts Canada, Girl Guides, YMCA, regardless of what organization it is, that they fulfill a need that government cannot possibly fulfill, because government simply would not have the money, would not have the resources to be able to do everything for everybody. And that's why we depend on groups and organizations like the AIDS Committee, like the Autism Society, like the Boys and Girls Club, and the list goes on. The list is a mile long, of course. We depend on those organizations to be able to deliver programs and services in the community for people, and to be able to do it in a cost-efficient manner. And everybody knows that there's nobody can stretch a dollar like these volunteer organizations. They really do. We all know that, right? I'd say that the dollar's 3 to 1. If we were to take some of these community organizations and turn it into a government department or agency, it would probably be 10 times the cost of what they're doing it. So they do valuable work. But in order for them to do that valuable work, they do need some support. They need a reasonable level of support. So I think that this bill does go a long way, as I said, in providing that certainty so that they can plan and the funding. But again, Madam Chair, it only works if the multi-year funding that they're receiving is adequate funding for them to be able to carry out the work that they did. And I think, as pointed out by my colleague by Mount Pearl North, as a result of the budget last time around, there were a lot of organizations that lost a lot of money. And I think that's all that's being pointed out. Hopefully, they're able to carry on and continue to do the great work they're doing, but obviously it's going to be much tighter if you don't have the same amount of money to do it, and that's the concern being raised. Thank you, Madam Chair.